You wouldn't think that anyone could be so immoral as to dance on the graves of the dead. But the Victorians did. We often think of 19th century society as one of rank, dignity, and respect, underpinned by religion and morality. The Victorians were, after all, prim and proper people, weren't they? Today, you will discover a horror story that just might make you question what kind of people the Victorians really were. The Enon Chapel, St. Clement's Lane, West London, was, from 1823, licensed to bury the dead in a vault beneath a house dedicated to the worship of God. In the space of 20 years, however, a notorious scandal erupted that would shame Victorian society, for when the chapel closed, it became a dancing saloon and theatre. However, the dead remained below the feet of dancers. Thousands of cadavers had been crammed into the vault. Find out how, in the 1840s, the Victorians not only partied on the bones of the dead, they made it one of the central attractions. Before we move on, if you're interested in history like this, and you want to find out more about what life was really like for people in the past, please consider subscribing for more content. If you'd like to support what we make for you, check out the description for links to ways you can help us continue bringing the past alive. There was once a burial place in London known as Enon Chapel, with a notorious reputation. Worse even, perhaps, than the offensive graveyard of the old workhouse of St. Clement Danes. But that's another story. It once stood between the Strand and Drury Lane in an area named Clare Market, a historic district of West London, immortalised by Charles Dickens in several of his novels. It was a maze of narrow streets and ancient buildings, many of which had survived the Great Fire of London. If you can imagine decrepit-looking Elizabethan houses overhanging shadowy alleys, you would have in your mind a description of the Clare Market slum, for here people lived from hand to mouth in some of the most squalid dens in the city. Enon Chapel was converted from secular to religious uses in 1823 to a chapel of ease to St. Clement's, a subordinate place of worship to the main parish church, and called Clare Market Chapel. It was close to the eastern entrance to Clement's Inn, and the access was through a gateway leading into a narrow and extremely dingy court. All has long been swept away, and law courts stand there today. Restrictions on burial of the dead were, apparently, lax and insanitary prior to the passing of the Burial Act in 1850, which proposed the closure of all burial grounds in London's vicinity, and allowed speculators to make money out of disposing bodies. According to a later occupier, it was the minister of the chapel himself who came up with the scheme. A parish offering comparatively cheap burials would have been an attractive prospect to the hard-up residents of Clare Market. Little did they know what they did with the bones of their dearest ones. Discussing the chapel's nefarious goings-on, a commentator of the time wrote, "These pious people, looking very naturally to ways and means, turned the vaults beneath their meeting-house into a burial place." A trapdoor inside the building gave access to a vault only 60 feet by 30 feet by 6.5 feet deep. Bodies were said to have been placed in pits, dug for the purpose, and covered with just a few inches of earth. None were placed in lead. No decency was exhibited. Coffins were piled in confusion. Large quantities of bones were mixed with the earth. Coffin lids were scattered everywhere, and might be trodden on at every step. What's more, a sewer ran across the pits. At one time, during its use for burials, the Commissioner for Sewers carried out some work to the vault's arches, and, in doing so, not only disturbed but dismembered the bodies. With cadavers in a state of putrefaction, black flies infested the place. The chapel soon became filled with coffins up to the very rafters, reportedly some 10,000 to 12,000 bodies, so that there was only the wooden flooring between the living and festering dead. A Sunday school was held in the chapel as well as a congregational meeting. More bugs. This time winged. They weren't identified scientifically at the time. Started to crawl and fly about the chapel, plaguing children attending the Sunday school. So bad did this become that, in the summer months, the stench being intolerable, children named them body bugs. Many worshippers couldn't stomach the foul odour and fled the building. One man reported a peculiar taste in his mouth during the time of worship, and stated that his handkerchief was so offensive that immediately upon his return home, his wife had to place it in water. Handbills were circulated in the neighbourhood, requesting parents and others to send the children of the district to the Sunday school, held immediately over the masses of putrefaction in the vault beneath. Residents about this spot, in warm and damp weather, were said to have been much annoyed with a peculiarly disgusting smell, and occasionally, when a fire was lighted in a house abutting the chapel, an intolerable stench arose, which people refused to believe emanated from drains. Vast numbers of rats infested houses, and meat exposed to this atmosphere, after a few hours, was said to have become putrid. The commentator, previously referred to, again states, "The state of things was allowed to continue till 1844, when a new sewer having to be carried under the building, the commissioners of sewers discovered the loathsome charnel house, and had the place closed, but left the bodies to lie there and rot, heedless of all consequences." New speculators took on ownership of the building, covered the existing wooden floor with a single brick layer, in turn covered by a new wooden floor, and opened the charnel house as a low dancing saloon. An old bill shows its character and the kind of people who used it. Dancing on the Dead was one of the attractions of the place. Enon Chapel, Dancing on the Dead, admission 3d. No lady or gentleman admitted unless wearing shoes and stockings. Thus it became a dancing room, where the thoughtless and giddy went to foot it away over, the mouldering remains of sad mortality, part of the bygone generation turning to dust beneath the dancers' feet. A surgeon, Mr. G.A. Walker, was desperately moved by the ignorance, cupidity, degraded morality, and indecency he found at Enon Chapel. He was angered by individual advantage being placed above the security of the dead and the health and comforts of the living. The real reason, in his opinion, that before new burial laws, such places of abomination existed at all. Our commentator again writes, "This loathsome abomination ceased in 1847 to 1848, when Mr. Walker gained possession of the chapel with the intention of removing the remains from the vault, or dust hole, as it was usually called by local undertakers, to a more appropriate place. The work of exhumation was then commenced." Apparently this was carried out at night, with the fee paid to the contractor to get labourers to do such gruesome work said to be enormous. And a pyramid of human bones was exposed to view, separated from piles of coffin wood in various stages of decay. This Golgotha was visited by about 6,000 persons previous to its removal, and some idea may be formed of the horrid appearance of the scene, when it is stated that the quantity of remains comprised 4 upheaved van loads. The whole mass of bodies was decently interred by Mr. Walker at his own cost, in one pit in the cemetery at Norwood, the coffin wood being piled up and burnt. It is indeed strange to think that such foul abuses were not swept away until the reign of Victoria. Mr. Walker sold the chapel on, and George Sanger, a circus impresario, took the lease in December 1850 with the intention of putting on conjuring shows for the winter season. He immediately fitted it up as an unlicensed theatre with proscenium, stage front, wings, and scenery, and, after trying conjuring once or twice, opened it as a penny gaff, theatrical entertainment for the working classes. Entertaining the crowds were actors, clowns, lion tamers, mock animal combats, and pantomime. Business was excellent. Sanger had a wagon and horses drive up and down the Strand, advertising his amusements. He was all set to make a lot of money. And then the spectre of Enon's ghastly history returned to haunt his plans. Contacted by a friend, who happened to be a police inspector, he was informed that Mr. Walker's contractor had not fully carried out his terms to remove the bodies from Enon Chapel. Some of his men had made known the fact that over 100 barrels of human bones remained, and, as a sort of grim joke, the coffin of the former minister, instead of being removed, had been cemented up in the floor at one end of the building. In fact, under the very spot over which his stage was erected. The authorities, who were not favourably disposed towards penny gaffs, resolved, as they were empowered to do under the new Burial Act, to raid and close the building until the remains were properly disposed of. But the policeman's hint was sufficient for Sanger to avoid trouble with the authorities. He was horrified to think that his pantomimes had been carried on over the dead. Having heard much by this time of the awful history of the building, he resolved to clear out right away, stopped all the performances forthwith, dismissed the band, and removed all properties and scenery to some large sheds in the Mile End Road. Enon Chapel was witness to scenes of horror, a Christian burial place for the dead that was desecrated by the living. Here ends one of the most shameful chapters in the history of 19th century London.